Lord, just thank you for this awesome conference. Lord, just getting to hang out with these guys has been a real blessing, and it's been real neat to hear from Holland and Ty, and just to be able to worship together with these guys all weekend has been just a really refreshing time, Lord. And even though I've been busy cumbered about with much serving, Lord, it's been nice to sit at your feet and just hang out with you. And so we just pray that the class would be helpful. It would be something that's useful for these guys, and we ask it in your name. Amen. First, let me give you guys a little background. I did take music theory in college, and so I have essentially a minor, minus the fact that I didn't play an instrument. And so it sounds funny, but to get an actual minor in college, you have to play an orchestra. You have to play. And so I grew up, I took piano lessons when I was young. I was in band for 3 years, and I was horrible. I hated piano. I was not any good. I couldn't play row your boat. I was just not a second chair for trumpets, and I actually played altos or soprano saxophone. So get that. Wow. And I wasn't any good. I quit basically music my freshman year because in order to get an A in band, you had to do marching band, and I thought that was dorky. So I just gave it up, and I didn't want to get up early. That's probably the real excuse. And so I stopped doing music altogether. And then actually my freshman year, my dad had always had a guitar at home, but he never really played it. He would pull it out once in a while and dink around on it. And so I just picked up his guitar and started playing that year. And I would say within a year I was leading worship for a high school group. And I played guitar for probably 10 years before I even touched another instrument. And the drums is what I actually went to next. And the only reason I did that was because I was raising up some kids for a youth group to lead worship. And we had a keyboard player, we had a guitar player, we had a bass player, but we didn't have a drummer. And so I was like, I will do that. And it's for junior highs. So you don't have to be good. It's like, who cares? And so I did that. And then actually, it wasn't until Brandon came on staff that I even started playing piano. So it's been actually just 3 years that I've been playing piano, and I've actually just bought a really beautiful antique grand piano for my home, and so I play that more than anything really now. And so I'm giving you guys background, but I will tell you this. From a guy who was self-taught on acoustic guitar, knew nothing about music, and I really didn't have any formal instruction. I didn't have YouTube back then, unfortunately. And so I really did just go get chord books from, Tri-City Bible Bookstore and come home and learn those chords. And I didn't even use the internet really very much to learn stuff. It was really just chords, listening and playing along with stuff. When I got to college and I took music theory, it was very eye-opening. And I'll tell you this, I play electric guitar, and it really opened the landscape up for me with electric guitar in ways I'd never experienced. And for acoustic guitar, it showed me some things that I've been doing that I didn't even know why I was doing them, and some things I had figured out. And it was so helpful. And I'll just say this. Knowing theory saves you so much time. If you invest in, I'm going to share some really simple concepts with you guys today, some things that are just hopefully not too over your head if you have no formal music background. I find that piano players are the best at theory, and sometimes because they have to take theory, it's like very structured, ingrained in them. But most of the time it's because the instrument's so visual. And you kind of see theory practically this looking at the instrument itself. And so it's really cool. Mike, can you unmute the keyboard, by the way? And so it's very visual. You kind of learn piano as, you learn theory just by playing the piano and seeing what you're doing. So there's that. I want you guys to be really good at what you do. And I don't want you to spend much time on it. And I think that's a good premise to start with. And Brandon talked about this, but what makes up music? And I was thinking about like what we're going to actually talk about, and I put rhythm in there, and we're not going to talk about that at all. And so if you're a drummer, I'm sorry, that's really not the focus of this class. I'm not going to be able to help you in that regard at all. But I do think melody and harmony are things that are essential, and I think we're gonna get into those a little bit. So here's the first thing: is music is math, but it's not boring. It's not boring math. And here's what I'm going to share with you guys today: is if you can do like some basic addition and subtraction, and just be mindful of think of like how things are actually structured and orderly. I know like creatives sometimes think because we're creative that those things don't apply, which is to me, kind of nonsense. You think about music and the way it's structured and the way it works. There it is. And like you start realizing what God has done and how even creating music and how it's very structured and orderly. And it speaks to me of the nature of God and his ingeniousness. I mean, just absolutely amazing to think that God has created something that is so, I would say, that can be so beautiful, and yet when you go through and look at it, it can be broken down like a computer and broken down to binary and numbers. It's really interesting that way, and so it's all structured. And you know, one of the things my music theory professor taught me in college is that everything has a frequency to it as well, and so you know, your door has a frequency, your car engine has a frequency. You know, the planets rotate at frequencies, and even played a chord for us once of all the planets in our solar system. And I was like, that's beautiful. And, you know, you obviously have to take some of these and move them to octaves we can hear. But it was very interesting. But it just really helped me understand, okay, when I'm not just, you know, it's not like a blank canvas and I'm having to come up with these things. There's some rules, there's some structure. And if I understand that, it's going to help me a lot. And by the way, my last semester of music theory, we got into 20th century music, which is like atonal. It's just like, and it's nonsense. It's garbage. It's not fun to listen to. I don't know why anyone composes it. No one listens to it. It's junk. And it's because they're like, we just want to think outside the box and not have any order or structure to what we do. And then no one wants to listen to you. Fantastic. Brandon mentioned this yesterday, the Nashville number system. I think Nashville stolen it from like Mozart, but whatever. You know, it's been around. My point is, it's been around long before even Mozart. And essentially, it's this, you guys. If we're in the key of C, let's just think this. There's 7 tones, which, by the way, you guys know the number 7 in the Bible. It has some significance. Again, I think it's beautiful. The number 8 would be the number of new beginnings, even. We learned it from The Sound of Music. Do a dear female, dear Ray. And just, right, there's a couple half steps in there, and if you know your music, you know where there's at. If you know piano, you know where they're at, just because there's not a black key there. That's where the missing black key. Those are your half steps. Everything else are whole steps. C, D, E, and then there's no black key in between E and F, and there's no black key between B and C. Which, by the way, is significant. Half steps are very powerful. I forgot to put this in my PowerPoint. But let me show you what's going on here so you guys can understand this a little bit better. When we're saying Nashville number system, what we're saying is each note in the key of C, there's only 7, each have a chord associated with it. Okay? And so when you understand, it becomes a lot easier. When you understand that worship music really doesn't even have the 2 and the 3 or the 7, and you really only have 4 chords, now you just made things even easier. It's like, I'm only using 4 chords to get rid of the 3 or the 2 and the 3, and I don't think I've ever seen a 7 on a chord chart in the history of worship music. So don't even have to think about that. Just cross that one off your list. Holland threw some borrowed chords in today from a couple of his songs. That's weird, but for the most part, it doesn't have your chord. I would say this: 75% of songs only have 1, 4, 5, 6, and then there's I would say the next 15% that have a 2 in there, and then even more rare a 3, and then like I would say 2% of worship songs have something outside of the key. I mean, it's so rare for them to pull maybe what's called a flat 7 or a 5 of 5 or something like that. But it's really, you don't need to know those in the context of worship because they're not used enough. And so when you do run into them, know that they're outside the key and know that you need to learn that. But other than that, you don't need to sit there and think about it too much. So if you can know those, just know that. So whatever key you're in, that's so important. So if you're in the key of C, C is number 1. It's that easy. Okay, C is 1, 5 is G. Okay, and that's important too because essentially one of the first things we learned in theory was that in a song, everything is this battle, this struggle between 1 and 5. And so 1 again is, if this is my, and 5 is this. It's the chord that's the furthest away from 1, and it has this leading tone, what's called a leading tone. It's a half step before 1. And you can, again, you see let me show you how powerful this is. I had a kid come into our theory class every day, and he would do that right before class start. And you're like, oh, thank you. That's the power of the 5. It's that focus on that note. It's the third in the G chord. And what you find is you don't think about it this way, but most songs are basically going from, doesn't matter what the song is. It's a resolve. It wants to get to 5, basically, if we're using Brandon's analogy, travel to 5 on a bridge or whatever, and then walk itself back to 1. It wants to resolve to 1. You'll see songs that will end on a 4, and you're always like, it ends, and you're kind of like, you are good, oh, and then that's 1. But if I ended on you are good, oh, you'll have songs that will do that, and you're like, oh, thank you. It's like, just end there, get there already. Even worse is a song that ends on, and they don't do it. They don't end songs on 5 because of how painful it is. And so, I'm telling you guys this because it kind of helps you understand, just again, that, if you're writing songs or if you're just playing songs, to see that dynamic in there. It's not like life-changing, but it'll help you see. So, there's a thing called the circle of fifths in music. And I say, can you remember seven letters? And you don't need to remember them in on every different key. There's really just remember these 7 letters. Can you remember 7 letters? C, G, D, A, E, B, F. If you can do that, that's going to be helpful for you. And for a number of reasons. One, I think the fifths are very powerful because the less, these are octaves, the more you add in, you're going to see, there's the fifth, sorry. The more you add in notes, the more what we call color comes in, but it also can get more dissonant. And so the fifth is whereas the octave, you can barely even tell there's like any dissonance. The fifth is the next least dissonant note you can add. Now, by the way, if I added the most, or even, that would be the one that's the grossest. That's the augment. But you get the idea. So if you can remember the circle of fifths, what this is going to do for you is a couple things. It's going to tell you when you're in a key, how many sharps are in that key, for example. So black notes again. And I use sharps almost exclusively because in worship music, hardly ever play any keys in flat. So you don't really need to know that. Like, I'm not going to teach people things they're never going to do. And every once in a while, if your worship leader pulls out something in B flat, just be like, this guy, silly. He thinks he's so smart. But no, it's like really, and of worship keys, if you guys, I don't know about you guys, but like we typically play C, G. Every once in a while, we'll play something in D. We'll play stuff in A pretty routinely, E and B, but never in F, because that's a flat key. And like nothing really in sharp keys either. That's just how we do stuff. Here at the church, that's the culture I started. Brandon just continued it because that's how he does stuff as well. And the reason being is because it helps your musicians. They don't have to sit there and think about sharps and flats as much, and they can just focus on the worship, and it helpful in that regard. But basically what I'm telling you is, if you can remember those 7 letters, you can know how many sharps are in your key. And so let's just skip to the D, for example. D has 2 sharps, okay? And it's kind of funny how it works, but the key of D, the sharps are F and C sharp, but basically as you move up, so D is the second one over, has 2 sharps. Can you guys guess how many A has? And E? And yeah, you guys are catching on quickly. And so that's a thing in theory you learn right from the get-go, because it's a helpful reminder when you're in a key how many sharps there are. And again, that's just so you know relative to where you need to shift things, really. If you're a guitarist, again, put a capo on, move it around. You don't even have to think about these things. A piano player, if you have the transpose button, you can do that. The problem with that is if you're at home, you don't have that on a real piano. And so I've had to learn the keys of songs I play in just because I play real piano at home, and it's actually very helpful. It's been very good to me. 0 sharps in C. So 0, and then G's got 1, and it's an F sharp. D's got 2, it's an F and a C. A's got 3, it's an F, a C, and a who knows, G. You guys even see the pattern there? 1, the first sharp, 2 sharp, 3 sharp, 4 sharp. And so it even follows that pattern there. And so, again, all that to kind of help you guys just understand some basics. But the thing I wanted to get to was the third. I think this is the most helpful for harmony, for vocalists, guitarists, piano players, because the third builds chords, okay? So if you can remember the circle of fifths, that's great. These letters to me are more important, and it's A, C, E, G, B, D, F. Now again, depending on what key you're in, let's say we're in the key of D, I'm going to know immediately I have 2 sharps, and it's going to be F and C. So it would be A, C sharp, E, G, B, D, F sharp. Do you follow? So I'm just giving you the order of numbers, but once you have that order of numbers down, you know what key you're in, then you immediately know some very important things. And these are essentially how you build chords. And this is why I had my phone up here. This is the beauty of technology. So when you're building a chord, I'm going to use the key of C as well, just because it's easy. There's no sharps or flats, and it's all the white keys. Piano players love that. But basically, a chord is built off of thirds, meaning every other note. So just look at the alphabet there. I skipped B, I skipped D, I skipped F. It's really that simple. There's only 7, so you're not talking about a ton of notes. And you'll see a chord, C, I skip D, E, skip F, G. There's my chord. Pretty simple. It's funny, when I play guitar, I played for probably 3 or 4 years before I knew I was playing more than one note. Because all I saw was a chord. It said G. And I didn't know there was other notes in that chord. It's like I knew it was called a chord, but I didn't know there was other notes in it. Does that make sense? And I didn't know anything. I grew up, had no understanding of music, even though I played in band and took piano lessons. Like I said, it was worthless to me. It did nothing for me. And so if you were to walk these up as you go, if you go back to the national number system, I'll show you, just show you guys on here. But basically, you'll see how these chords are built. And there's my F. Go around. Like, how is that going to work? Got to go around this thing. G. And then this is gross. And then back. But basically, what I'm showing you guys is the ugliest way to build chords, which is just walking them up like that. The only song I've ever heard that did that. But I'll never play chords like that. And guitar players do essentially that sometime on guitar, and it sounds really not very good. And I'll explain why, but it just doesn't, it's not very pretty, it's not very melodic. And, basically, what you're doing is you're building chords, but you're not building them, you're not transitioning them the way that you should. If you notice also, as I'm going up, again, I love piano because of how visual it is. Here's my half step, and as I move, now my half step's behind. And what essentially is happening is that middle note. The reason why, Brandon even talked about this with minor chords. The reason why minor chords are so powerful. Don't want to fall again. Let me get it in frame, though. So let's see. Let me do a really low minor chord so you can just... You can see the reason the minor chord is so powerful has to do with this middle note. If I just play this, you don't actually know what key I'm in. I could be in the key of A. But as soon as I add this color to that's where all the real, I would say, color of the chord, the brunt of that chord is. The problem with it is you cannot add that color way down here because it sounds so muddy. And so when I play piano, I almost always do like a... There's the first and third on that hand. Can you see it this way? Yes. Almost. Even though it's sideways, it's going to look funny. So, that's the voicing I started with, was 1 and 5 and 1 and 3. And the reason is because the voicing's much prettier than trying to pack everything down there. I know a lot of piano players start with like an octave on the low end too. I don't do that because I think, well, at least in context of worship, if you're the only one playing, it might change. But when you're playing with other people, you don't need to play the octave. The bass guy can do those notes down there. And so I play the 1 to 5, 1 and 3. So I started doing that, and that's kind of how I started playing piano. On acoustic guitar, it was a different world, but I'll show you guys some chords on it in a moment that just will be helpful if nothing else. But really, you're building chords, and the reason I'm showing you this is because once you have those letters down in your head, then you can start to build harmony. Because all harmony is taking one of these 3 notes, and so if the lead singer is singing that note, then you can sing one of these other notes. That's what harmony is. It's taking that note, one of these other notes that aren't being sang, and using it to fill in what's not there. And so it doesn't always work perfectly depending on the song. Some songs are really easy to harmonize with. Some are more difficult. But let me go back to my laptop. I love technology. It's so sweet. So, thirds build chord, add color, and once you have those down, you can start to build harmony, and this is true again across piano, across electric guitar especially. When I figured this out on electric guitar, it changed how I played completely. You know, what I had done before was just played what the acoustic guitar player was playing, and maybe I'd play part of the chord, not all of it, but really this helped me so much. And so I'm going to take a really common chord progression. This was from The King of My Heart. Right? And you see the chords there. If we're using the Nashville number system, it's 6, 5, 4, 1, which is not a super common. You know, usually your chord progressions are 1, 4, 6, 5, or 1, 6, 5, 4, 5, or something like that. This one is less common, but I do think it shows you something here. And what we're going to see here is these are all the notes that are in these chords. Okay, so the A is not just we call it an A minor, but it's just a chord that has an A, a C, and an E in it, and it makes it a minor chord because of where that half step falls. And then you have the G, B, D. That's the 5, falls down to the 4. If you actually think about the alphabet, what's actually going on here? If again, understanding that it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then goes back to A, it's falling. Every note here is falling. 6, 5, 4, and then it takes this leap to 1. What I really want you to look at for a moment is the common notes. So think about this in terms of harmony. Now, the problem is I put the 5 in a really awkward spot, and I did it on purpose because I wanted to go challenge us a little bit. It's usually a lot easier if you don't have the 5 in there at all to create harmony. But the 5 is really that color. It's going to be the thing that draws you and pulls you away from the 1. And so if you notice this, the common notes between 6 and 5 are none. There are no common notes. The common notes between 4 and 5, there are no common notes. So I can't sit there if I'm harmonizing, and let's say I'm singing an A, or you probably won't sing an A. You'd probably be singing a C if you're doing harmony. You have to move to a B, or you have to move up to a D in order to harmonize. You can't just stay on this note forever, although I like to sometimes. It would be nice. You can't do that. And so just practically, you don't have to see this on my phone, but just to show you guys, like when I'm, again, playing, let's see. If I'm going from that chord, a lot of times what I can do, because of the power of the 1 and the 5, I can hang out with those up here all day long on almost every chord. Is my point. Whereas I can hang out in the just a C note and a G note up here. I do that on electric guitar all the time. I do that on piano quite often. And on acoustic guitar, you're probably doing it and you don't even realize it. You really do. You hang out in the 1 and 5. Every chord that I teach guitar players is the bottom 2 strings are almost always 1 and 5. That's what they are. And there's a reason for that because they sound pretty throughout the whole chord. But let me show you guys this. So I showed you just the first 3 notes in a chord. There's this thing called the 7th, and this is where things get tricky, but really it's just adding one more note to that chord. And so we didn't have any common notes before, but now we have a common note when we play what's called an A minor 7. You guys have seen that on your chord charts? A minor 7, that's why it's there, because they're showing you what's actually in the chord. And you're like, I didn't know that's what it is. And it's letting you know now you have a common note that's a harmony there. Here I've got a common note, it's a harmony there. And then, again, from these 2 chords, if you look at those, there's actually quite a few common notes. I've got 2 notes that are the same there. And again, from an A minor, now this helps me understand, this really has been really helpful for me, is to understand that in A minor, if I get rid of the root here, what chord is that? That's a 1. A 6 and a 1 are the same chord. And I treat them exactly the same when I do harmony and when I play guitar. And really the only person who needs to treat them differently is the bass player. He's the only person in the band. And unless you're like, again, on the keyboards, really rocking low end. But other than that, the only guy who needs to make that move is, and so 1 and 6. And so really when you're doing worship music, you only need to know 3 chords, 1, 4, and 5. And then make your bass player learn the 6th chord. And then you can do fantastic without it. I'm kind of joking, but what I'm trying to show you guys is, for example, when you've got a harmony and you've got, basically what again, some of this takes ear and it takes some practice and sitting down, but you can find out where that melody lands. So let's go back to You Are Good. It's going to be on one of these notes, right? The melody didn't do anything. I didn't even realize that. It's kind of boring. So, but because it doesn't do anything, it just hangs out there. It allows you to build really cool harmonies off of it because you can just sit there on top of the. What I did was walk down. Good. Oh, you follow me? And so you just open this landscape when you understand that this is where my melody is. That what notes are around it? What are the notes around it? And then how can I keep those together? And again, it really helps me on electric guitar because I can sit there and instead of trying to transition every chord, I find the common notes between them. Yeah.
Can you just reiterate, did you just say that you take the third of those chords and that's what created the harmony?
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be the third.
What you just played.
Yeah, so the melody just sits on one note, really. You are, it's, it does a, you are good, good, oh. It doesn't do, it's not moving. What I'm saying is, as it moves down, the harmony is where your color of that is going to move in. So it doesn't have to necessarily be the third of each chord, but it can be something in there. You're going to find the notes that work for it. And honestly, I couldn't just tell you off the top of my head which ones are going to be the best for that harmony. But what I can tell you is you can almost stay put because the melody is not moving very much. That's what you want to see. And so now you need to figure out if my melody is landing mostly on C, and, it's when like, you are good, good, oh, that's all the same note. So now what I can do is I can take maybe the third, but as I'm going through the chords, or here's the fifth of this, I can go E, but I know I need to move my harmony down to here, but that's really close to that note. So maybe I don't want to do that. So maybe instead I go up to here, and then on my F, I go down to an F. You follow me? It's what you're signing to find those common notes. And again, it's not always perfect, and I really, it's something with harmony, it's almost you want to train your ear to do. But as you're playing this way, you're going to train your ear to do this as well. And that's really what I'm going to hopefully be helpful for you guys that are doing this stuff. I think for guitarists and piano players especially, learning inversions is so important. I said versions. Inversions. Every chord has 3 versions of inversions. And so basically all that, if you've ever seen a chord chart that says G/B, when I first saw that when I was a guitar player, I was like, I don't know what that means. And I just ignored it for a long time. And I found out I did just what I did that. It's not a big deal. Because the only person who really needs to know that is the bass player. I was like, I don't need to know that. But I will tell you this, especially on piano, knowing inversions is very helpful. And I'll go back to my phone here for a moment, just so you can see. Like I said, when I first started playing piano, I really just used those chord voicings I showed you. I didn't move them around a lot. Let's go sideways again. I like that better. I didn't move, and I'll stay down here. And so I would seriously just take, this idea of a 1 and 5 and a 1 and 3. That sounds better than this. It's not as blocky, but it's still very blocky. You're moving around quite a bit. What I learned with inversions was, so if I'm playing a C, for example, here, I can play this chord 3 different ways. As I go up, I can play it with the root as a C. I can play it with the root as a E, because either the same notes, or I can play it with a root as a G. And so now what I do when I'm playing piano is, instead of having to move around as much and move my hand everywhere I go, I'll typically keep that left hand. I'll keep that left hand in the fist, but now maybe my right hand is going to start with this chord. And then when I move to a F, instead of moving everything, my right hand just moved to this inversion, and I even left a note out. I can put that in there if I wanted to, but I left it out. And then when I go to an A minor, and there's my G on my right hand. And that was so helpful for me. I don't always move my left hand either. Sometimes I'll do some inversions on there, especially if I have a bass player. But it's really a smart thing to do. And then you're also learning harmony. The best harmonies are ones that have the least amount of movement. And again, when you have a lot of movement, you run into some issues. One of the things that they taught us in theory was, like, for example, having fists that are parallel and your harmonies sound really bad. And it was a rule. We had to go through it, and we had to write harmonies, and we're not allowed to move fists around like that, where you have 1 and 5 moving, because it creates what's called block harmony. It sounds not good. It's not pleasing to the ear, and you'll hear people do that. And so how you resolve some of that is figuring out some of these inversions. And I typically start with my inversions again on 1, and then move them around. So 1, 4, again, 6 is 1 to me on an inversion, so I don't have to do anything in that. So I just learned 3 hand things from my right hand, and then my left hand will even just play just the bass sometime, depending on what's going on. And it really has helped me a ton, just knowing, again, those common notes, seeing the significance of that, and how powerful those things are. So let me do one more thing back on my laptop, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. And maybe if you guys have some questions, we'll do some questions. So learn inversions. I think it's super helpful. Again, on a guitar, it sounds like you don't need to, but once you do, you're going to really realize why I'm telling you this and why it's helpful, especially if you're trying to play electric guitar and not just stomp all over what the acoustic guitar player is doing. Here's one I learned, I would say, within the last few months. I've been doing music forever, and I started noticing, I've been doing some lead parts on piano and making some tracks, and I noticed every one of these leads leaves out the fourth. And so this is for electric guitar players, this is for piano players, and I started going, why do they do that? And so I'll give you guys some examples of songs. You'll hear them. That's not a good one. That has a fourth in it. I lied. Another one that was that same song I was playing that did have that. The chorus of that has a lead part that goes like this. And I was noticing this in a lot of songs. I just found that a lot of songs are leaving the fourth out, and the reason they're doing it is because the fourth tells you a lot of what key you're in. And so if you could play a little bit more ambiguously, and so you'll see it on electric guitar especially, you can sit there and kind of play every note in the chord, leave the fourth out, and you really can just jam a lot easier. As soon as you put the fourth in there, it's like, I don't know, it wants to draw you to something. It's really bizarre. And so I found that, I'm just going through, this was just an observation of mine, listening to modern lead parts. And so when I've started writing some melodies, I've even noticed if I leave that fourth out there, it just creates a little bit more space or landscape for me to do some stuff. So that was a thing I just recently figured out. And again, it's not like don't ever play the fourth, because obviously you play the fourth in a lot of things, but I just was like really blown away by how many lead parts out there don't have the fourth in it. And if you actually go pay attention, you'll see that to be true. And again, the whole purpose of this, you guys, is I wanted to give you guys some tools, and you're going to obviously have to go through and actually figure. I'm just giving you guys, like, these are some highlights. These are things you can learn if you go into this stuff. Obviously, I'm not teaching you these things. I'm like showing you things that you can learn. And the reason being is because again, going from a guy who had no background at all in theory, and just learned guitar, I didn't even know, for example, like the first few months I played, I would see these chord charts, and the chord I would try to play didn't sound right. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I saw this little number and this little term FR next to it. And I found out that meant fret. I didn't even know what that meant. And I've been playing these chords on the wrong fret all this time. I had no understanding, no knowledge. And then when I went to and learned some, basic things in theory, and I really thought, it took me some time to grasp some of these concepts, and so I'm sorry if they're over your heads, but when I did, they were very helpful. And if you will put a little bit of time into it, I think it will make you that much better of a musician, and you're going to excel a lot faster with a lot less effort. And so that's my encouragement, is you guys were to be faithful with what we've been given, and if you want to be great at music, I think it's worth investing some time into learning some of these things. And again, I'm giving you guys just an idea of what you can learn and how, again, I'm not showing you all the harmonies and what you can do with them, but I'm showing you that once you know those things, you can open up a landscape that will help you do these things. So I think that's it, yeah. So do you guys have any questions or specifically about things here, or we can just call it good? Yeah.
So we haven't had bass players, so I've been doing octaves.
Mm-hmm. I would not do that if I was playing the bass, though.
Right. So now we have a bass.
Okay.
So does that change what you're playing if there is a slash chord, like if it's a G over a B? Do I play the 1 and the 5 on a G?
You don't have to. Now, because you have a bass player who's doing it. Make sure he's doing it, though. You don't have to. And so I'll play that sometimes. It just depends. Like if I'm doing a pad, maybe I'll put it in there, and just because I like the even the color of those kind of chords. So there's a couple popular progressions. Let's see. Let me get rid of that even. Versus if I play that the regular chord, so here's an A minor, G, and if I went down to here to C, and then F, I think it loses some of the flavor of not having that third. Does that make sense? A minor, G, now here's a C with an E. Because what they're doing with that inversion is they're trying to get that root note. And so they're trying to is walk it up to the F and show even an octave lower. That's what they're trying to emphasize there, and I think it loses some of its flavor. But you don't have to. It's nice because again, the bass player's responsibility really is to play that third, if that makes sense. And so when he's gone, I would definitely add it. You know what I'm saying? If he drops out and it's quiet, I would make sure I have that note in there.